Prehistoric garbage trucks have the city to themselves. Echoes and roars, dinosaurs, they all doing a monster mash. And most of the taxis, most of the whores are only taking calls for cash. I don't know how it happened. It all took place so quick. But all I can do is hand it to you and your latest trick. Well, now my door was standing open. Security was laid back and laughed. It was only my heart that got it broken. You must have had a pass key made out of wax. You played robbery with insolence, and I played the blues in 12 bars down on Lover's Lane. And you never did have the intelligence to use the 12 keys hanging off of my chain. I don't know how it happened. It all took place so quick. But all I can do is hand it to you and your latest trick. Well, now it's past last call for alcohol. Fast recall has been here and gone. The landlord, he finally paid us all. The satin chairs made us put away their horns. And we're standing outside of this wonderland, looking so bereaved and so bereft, like a Bowery bum when he finally understands the bottle's empty and there's nothing left. I don't know how it happened. It was faster than the eye could fly. But all I can do is hand it to you.
If there's anyone sitting outside that is uncomfortable with the cold weather, there's a few seats inside the chapel. If you'd like to come inside from outside, there's just a few seats available inside. Broderick will guide you if anyone's particularly cold out there. Thank you. please ensure that you've left your details on the COVID log. If you haven't already, you can do it after the service. And please make sure that your mobiles are turned off or on silent. Thank you. We don't want any calls coming through. Thank you. On behalf of Ashley, Guy and Rob's extended family, I welcome you all here today to this celebration for the life of Robin Miles Morphet, but I'll refer to him as Rob. My name is Carol Stevens and it's my privilege to conduct this morning's service. Someone this week described Rob as one of life's true gentlemen. So I googled that saying and I came across these words. A true gentleman does the right thing even when no one is watching. He is a man of his word and is not swayed by peer pressure or by popular opinion. The man he is at work is the same person you will encounter in the community and at his home. For those of you who know Rob, I think that sums him up pretty well. But in saying that, there are no sentences that could possibly cover every aspect of this wonderful, caring man, who displayed a strength of character and dignity that few possess. If we were to go beneath the surface, we would discover from an ordinary person, we would reveal an extraordinary human being. Rob came from that era that is now long gone, a generation that fostered old-fashioned values and morals, that a man should show by example a standard of principles like respect, honesty, and compassion. From a time when life was less complicated, where the measure of a man was his character, not how much money he had or where he lived. Rob believed that the treasures of life were family and genuine friends. He appreciated everything that he had, and he found contentment in what he did have. His two sons realised how lucky they were to have such a father in Rob. A dad who spent time with them, imparting his values, morals and wisdom, not just by voicing them, but by demonstrating them in how he lived his life. And when the grandchildren arrived, Rob was again in his element, relishing the joys of being a doting pa. Rob had no ego, nor anything to prove. He had no need for accolades. He was a methodical thinker who took his time to give measured answers and advice. Nothing was too much trouble. He never thought it was asking too much. He just did it and did it well. And he completed the task with his trademark gentle smile. I now invite Ash and Guy to come forward to present the eulogy for their dad.
Hello everyone, thanks for coming along. I know most people here, but for those that I haven't met yet, my name is Ash and I'm Rob's eldest son. My brother Guy and I will be splitting the eulogy. I'll be talking through the first half of his life and Guy will be talking through the later years. And this has been a real team effort from family and friends to put this all together, so thanks team. Robin, or Rob, was the first child of Trish and Miles Morphet and has 4 younger siblings, Brian, Barry, Lynette and Lucille. You would have seen most of them out the front handing out the bookmarks. And they're all here today. Rob was born in Charnwood Road in St Kilda and he attended Caulfield Grammar School through his whole schooling. I was chatting with his brothers earlier in the week, and Rob was the only one in the family who went to Caulfield Grammar for his whole schooling, and the other kids went to a state school in their primary years. And so they're pretty convinced that it's because Dad was the favourite son that he got to do all his schooling through a private school. Maybe, maybe not. When Rob was 6 years old, 6, the same age as Digby, my son, he'd sell newspapers out the front of the Junction Oval in St Kilda. And this was the start of his lifelong love with the St Kilda Footy Club, his beloved Saints. And he was even at the MCG for their famous and only premiership win. So while many of us question his commitment to the Saints during many lean years, like a lot of lean years, the question we ask more often is, what were Miles and Trish thinking putting their 6-year-old to work selling newspapers? We figured it must be expensive to feed 5 kids, or maybe it was to fund 12 years of tuition at Caulfield. When Rob was 12, the family moved to Ashburton, where they lived for many years, and Rob continued his high school education through Caulfield. He was in Barnett House and was heavily involved in cadets and athletics. And there's some fantastic photos you'll see a bit later from his time involved in these pursuits. Some of the few photos that we've seen of him without a moustache. And Dad would often talk about his school athletics, and his brother Brian got in touch with the Caulfield historian during the week, and they found that Rob was a member of the 4x880 yard relay team in 1963 that won this event at the APS Sports, so the national sports event. And Dad would often talk fondly about rounding the bend to the roar of the crowd. And that's that love of sport that stayed with him his whole life. At the completion of Year 11, Rob left Caulfield Grammar to continue studies at Dookie Agricultural College. And he spent 3 years there, although I've had a few conversations with some of his ag college mates who said that he repeated his final year, which they reckon was so he could play more sport for the college. He played footy, aths and tennis. And again, we've got some really great photos to show a bit later on. And one time, apparently he and a couple of college mates caught a train from Benalla all the way to Adelaide to play tennis in the National Ag College Championships. He acquired his Diploma of Agricultural Science from Dookie and spent several years working on properties in Victoria and New South Wales, gaining valuable experience in agricultural management. At the age of 26, Rob was managing a property in Warcool in northern New South Wales when he developed symptoms similar to those of brucellosis. After a variety of medical visits, he returned to Melbourne and was admitted to Fairfield Infectious Diseases Hospital, along with 30 other patients, who all became medical guinea pigs. It appears that the 4 massive doses of cortisone administered was not a successful treatment, and of the 31 patients, Rob was the only survivor to walk out of the hospital. It's pretty amazing. It was later found that Rob actually had Hodgkin's disease, or lymphoma number 1, as we like to call it now, and was admitted to Royal Melbourne Hospital, where he successfully recovered after receiving chemotherapy, again against the odds. He went on to manage properties Avalon and Winalta before buying Highfields in Merton in the late 70s. While he survived the cancer, I need a drink. the the strong chemo drugs had affected. Just a second. Yep. We'll be right. Thank you, Jamie. It affected his ability to have kids. So after marrying Roz, they made a decision to have kids through artificial insemination. How lucky for Guy and I. So, although there's no biological link, was still brought up by a supportive, proud, loyal and loving dad. I'll pass on to Guy for the next part.
We grew up on about 600 acres at Highfields in Merton. And it was the only place in Australia where you could look out your back door and see the snow on Mount Buller, walk out the front door and see the sun setting over the flats past Nagambie. On many days, the fog would not lift at all. The wind was so bloody wild that it sounded like a jet landing at Tullamarine. It was that high up, you could see the night lights of Uriah, Shepparton, Violettown, Dookie, Numurkah, Nagambie, and in fact so high you could almost feel the draft off the Melbourne to Sydney flight path. I make it sound like doomsday, but it was actually quite the opposite. It was a place that Mum and Dad worked extremely hard for, and our early years were filled not on computers or phones, but exploring our own land and all of its beauty. A very early memory of Dad was working on the land. On this occasion, he was clearing the copious amounts of bracken that was on the property. In fact, I think he may have been using a Ford McKernan chain slasher, which ironically we found as part of our clean-up not so long ago at the plum pudding factory. A local identity and mate of mine by the name of Tractor spotted this big lump of steel when cleaning up, and along with quite a few colourful expletives said, "That's a McKernan chain slasher." He was quite excited. Anyway, on this day in the late 80s, early 90s, Dad had been way down the back of the farm, almost the furthest point you could get away from the house, and where not often Ash or I would dream to venture in case some wild animal would come out and grab hold of us. This day, Dad got home and put what looked to be a tomato cutting in a jar of water and placed it on the windowsill above the kitchen sink. This was not uncommon, as often there was cutting, etc., out of the garden. It sat for about a day without notice from Mum until Dad asked, "Have you seen the cutting on the kitchen windowsill yet, Roz?" Mum, just presuming it was a cutting from the veggie garden, responded with, "What is it?" Dad returned serve with, "It's marijuana." Now, for those of you who know Dad well, he was very straight. He enjoyed a light beer, every now and then a glass of red, but he certainly wasn't into cultivating and selling hooter. So the question was, why was there a crop of marijuana growing on our farm, and how the hell do we get rid of it? Luckily for Mum and Dad, they contacted a local police officer whom they happened to know through tennis. The police sat off the property for a few days and caught these cheeky buggers who had set up a cannabis crop on our farm, even using water out of Dad's dam to water the plants. This could only happen in Merton. Dad was very methodical. Every task that he carried out was never in a rush. There was always a calculated plan and assessment of every situation. Often we would butt heads over this because whilst he was slow and steady, I was bull at a gate. I'm sure I tested his patience on more than a few occasions, but ever the gentleman that he was, he would remain calm. I have memories of going to cut wood on the farm. Dad had engineered his blue Fordson tractor to be able to tow 3 trailers behind it. This was when B-double semis were rarely sighted on the main roads, so for a young wild kid I thought it was a bloody road train on the hills of Merton. So off we would go, and the process of cutting wood was methodical. It wasn't pulling up to an old log on the ground and boring in with a steel magnum. It was time spent stripping the bark off the fallen tree with an axe. It was making sure the log was positioned at the correct angle to the hill in case it ended up in your eye. It was marking out 2 handspans and a whack with the axe to the correct length of the logs for the home fire. By this time, I was well and truly terrorising the sheep down the paddock. But Dad, being methodical, slow and steady, would strip that tree, mark out 2 handspans, whack with the axe, cut and split the wood. No petrol splitters in those days. And load up the road train and bring it back home to keep us all warm. Reminiscing, we all think our parents don't know anything. And it wasn't until having kids of my own that we start passing on some of these values to our next generations. Without knowing these early lessons that Dad was teaching me, they've certainly helped shape my career through business and sport. Another story, which wasn't methodical by any means, was the blowing of the dam. We had a dam in a gully that was actually close by to the house, and when it held water, was used to pump water up to the garden. But that was a problem. It wasn't holding water. Dad worked out there was a leak in the base of the dam, and after a few attempts at trying to reline the base with his little Fiat dozer, it was time for other measures. Enter another local identity, Daff Lamaro. At the time, Mum was nursing with Daff's wife Karen, and there must have been discussion about the several attempts to fix the leak in the dam. I'm not sure of the circumstances surrounding this plan. However, it was decided the next best option was to blow up the base of the dam, which would allow the clay to settle back over the leak and hopefully seal it up. You actually can't dream this stuff up, but it was actually a true story. Daff at the time was working for the Lands Department, and I can only hope he had his powder monkey licence. In any case, the dam was drained to an acceptable level, and there was quite a bit of gelignite positioned around the leaking area. By memory, I was about 9 years old at the time. 9-year-olds shouldn't be near explosives. So we were positioned up on the main track to the house at a very safe distance to watch the show. I'm not sure where Dad and Daff were located to detonate the blast, but what I remember next was this almighty bang and what looked like water and mud going about 50 metres in the air. If I was still in nappies, they would have needed changing, and I'm not sure if the dam ever held water again. In the early 90s, serious fires ripped through the area. At the time, Mum and Dad were hosting a party, and I remember looking out the front window to this massive amount of smoke and flames down the valley coming towards our farm. The fires were devastating and burned almost all of the farm out, sparing the main house and water tank. This must have been an extremely hard time for them, and Dad set about, with assistance of Apex Euroa, rebuilding fences, putting down stock, cleaning up land and generally trying to rebuild. But this was to come at a cost. And in the end, it was to move off the land and into Euroa. And this can't have been an easy decision to make. So what do you do when you move off the land? You set up a plum pudding factory. At this time, Dad's brother Barry and wife Sue owned a restaurant in East Melbourne called George and Simpson. They were looking to outsource the manufacturing of fine foods, mainly Christmas cakes and puddings, and the Aroa Fine Foods name was formed. There was a lot to learn, and Dad set about making sure he was educated on the product. He was methodical, as always, in his approach, and in a big tin shed in Euroa, he started supplying the likes of David Jones, Myer and Coles, to name a few. It was here that Dad formed a very close bond, majority of the time, with head pastry chef Peter Wetherill. At the peak of production, there was about 3 to 4 kitchen staff and up to 14 on the packing tables. Huge amounts of dried fruit, brandy, eggs, butter would go through that place, and all behind this was a humble man just doing his bit. The product was outstanding, and over many years, a lot of local people, and people far and wide, would have enjoyed a Aroa Fine Foods Christmas pudding or cake at some stage. The brand would continue over a 27-year period, right up until October last year. It was here that I received a call from Ash saying, "Daddy's not feeling that well at the minute." And Dad was a fit man, so for him to get unwell was uncommon. He was admitted to Shepparton Hospital for some testing and then transferred to St Vincent's Private for more extensive exploration. On the 27th of October 2020, lead haematologist delivered the news that Dad had developed an aggressive cancer called T-cell lymphoma, or lymphoma number 2 as we called it. The PET scan showed the extent of the condition to be stage 4, and it was already in his blood, bones, liver, kidney and lungs. Really the only spots that were clear from the scan were his heart and his brain. This news was heartbreaking. No one should have to suffer this disease once in a lifetime, but twice was just so unfair. I remember sitting at the end of his bed, quite emotional, and Dad's response was, "I'm happy that I now know, so how are we going to beat this bloody thing?" He was always looking for the positive in any situation. Professor Ali Bazargan, whom Dad became very close with, was proactive and was up for the fight alongside Dad. Ali, if you are watching this, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Your dignified and professional approach is something we will never ever forget. Ali and Dad became quite the team. They started a very intense form of chemotherapy over 5 cycles. The side effects of this were rough, and on the many visits that Ash and I made, not once would he complain. He was so courageous no matter what, and was going to make sure that he got to meet his newest granddaughter Daisy. This was a very special time for Dad. It was another milestone that he reached, to be able to hold his newest little girl. He was so very proud of all of his grandchildren. The end of the chemo phase came around, and it was what Ali referred to as D-Day. A comparable PET scan would either tell us if the chemo was working, but there was nothing more now that could be done, and his courageous battle was to come to an end. Dad passed away peacefully on Saturday the 10th of April. And I share this story with you not to be confronting, but to give an insight into his character and how extremely proud.
Johnny come lately in Rob's life, and I thank Ash, Guy and the Morphet family for the privilege to say a few words. I first met Rob in 1998 in the capacity of very proud dad of Ashley. Most was Euroa Fine Foods, and that he and his small team baked puddings and cakes and motions. Rob made mention of the many members of the team who had helped him make and package the goods at the Rose Street factory throughout the years. He respected and appreciated their contribution. Peter and James Carter were 2 of the longer-term members of the Euroa Fine Foods team. Later on, I discovered that Rob made mixtures for a network of businesses using their recipes and brands. When visiting the factory, the smell of the spices, the brandy, the candied peel made it a welcoming environment. Rob said on numerous occasions that he never received any complaints from the neighbours, but anyone on a diet really needed to steer clear of the property, particularly during baking sessions. He had a regular habit of completing whatever had to be mixed in the morning and packaged before being loaded in the ovens, then sitting at his desk and reading the Herald Sun. If the proof was in the eating, Rob was a great consumer of his own products. He ate a piece most days, retiring from that organisation, and continued to be a mentor and supporter of the club's activities. He was elected to the board of Euroa Health, and I read that he spent 28 years as a director with 2 terms as chairman. That's a powerful length of time. He was president of the Euroa Rotary Club in 2005-06 and chaired a variety of the subcommittees. He was a foundation member of the group that commenced the farmers market in Euroa. He volunteered ready for use. He became an ever-reliable booking agent and respected supervisor. Rob was compassionate and caring of others. He championed the underdog. This extended to joining a Euroa Rotary Club working party journeying to Pradong in Cambodia in March 2019. In significant humidity, Rob was out digging holes, shovelling dirt and sand, and cleaning up a school site. It was heavy work for a fit and willing 73-year-old. Ross Wright, founder of Choice Cambodia, fondly recalls Rob's construction work erecting the bike shed on the site. He contacted me 2 days ago to pass on his condolences to Rob's friends and family. The trip was also extra special for Rob because he met up with Ash, who was following up humanitarian work previously carried out in that country. Rob was a regular weekly attendee at Rotary meetings. He enjoyed the camaraderie and activities. On many occasions, he pursued a point raised by the speaker, demonstrating his attentiveness to guest speakers and programs. He enjoyed the school debates and was a frequent driver for contestants travelling to neighbourhood venues. He was a Paul Harris Fellow, and the capital contributed to the Rotary International Fellowship Fund on Rob's behalf continues to earn income that is distributed to those around the world in need. Rob was pragmatic and frugal. If something had a second life, Rob carefully stored it aside. When fixing fences or building sheds, he saved the wire, the bolts, nails, tin or timber that could be used for another job. Similarly for motor parts, bottles and containers. He was also smart and a jack of all trades. He had the confidence to have a go at anything mechanical. I recall the stripped-down chocolate coating machine whose pieces littered the big wooden table at the factory after he became ill, and I wondered if Donald and Sarah have it reassembled. Sure, he had opinions and voiced ways to do things right, contrary to those of some others, but above all, Rob was loyal. His family was important. His friends mattered. He worked hard. You could count on his word. He was generous with his time. His family and friends will miss him, and so will this community.
Thank you, Michael. I will now read out a letter from Dave and Anne Kelly, two of Rob's closest friends. On behalf of Anne, Lara, Alex, Thomas, Bridget, their respective partners and myself, our sincere sympathies go to Ashley, Guy and Rob's family. We are very sorry that we can't be there to celebrate Rob's life story today, but we are in Adelaide for a commemorative service for my mother who passed away last year during a COVID lockdown. Anne and I have known Rob since 1984, having met him soon after our arrival in Euroa. Our two children, Lara and Alex, were of similar age to Ashley and Guy, and we became close friends and good mates. Rob invited David to join him in Apex. Rob and Roz, David and Anne shared many fun times at Apex social events over the years. This often meant dressing up and partying into the wee small hours. Apex was great fun, and we enjoyed our involvement until forced retirement at the age of 40. Rob was honoured with a life membership on his retirement, recognition of his many years of service to the community and to the club. After his retirement from Apex, Rob continued to be an active, involved, energetic and dedicated member of the community and soon became a member of Rotary. Early on, Rob and Roz showed their generosity of spirit, stepping in to look after our kids when Anne returned to South Australia to nurse her dying father during the last month of his life. This was at a time when I was very busy at the surgery, and we realised then that Rob and Roz were true friends. The years that followed involved regular shared dinners, either at our place in Gurum or at their home in Merton. Our kids have strong memories of driving up the long and winding road to Highfields, opening the gates and taking in the broad, distant views. Very much later, they would also remember being dragged out of bed to return home, their parents having had a grand time. The Morphet Kelly gang grew with the addition of Tom and Bridget Kelly, who became part of the travelling road show. We fondly remember these nights as being full of laughter, the occasional glass of wine, a roaring log fire, and usually some dancing around the lounge room. Dates and years are hard to remember, but we managed some combined camping trips to Harqua River and other beautiful spots in the mountains. Eventually, high school and the sporting aspirations of the kids meant that these times became harder to organise, but they were some of our best times together. Since then, Anne and I continued to share holidays with Rob, whether at Lawn or for a while at our beach house in Port Arlington. Rob and I would always seek to catch a fish, but the dinner parties that followed were far more successful, especially if this involved more dressing up. In latter years, we seemed to see less of Rob as business and grandchildren got in the way of us having fun. But we would still catch up for dinner, and on a number of occasions, Rob joined our family around the Christmas table, always supplying the fruit cake and puddings, of course. Rob was a gracious guest, not afraid to air his views and opinions about current events, giving and taking stick from our now adult children. As much as Rob was, he did as much fun as Rob was, he had a deeper side, showing passionate heart for our local hospital, serving for many years on the hospital board, and a significant part of that as president. Rob was a community man with a caring heart. We've seen it through his concern for others less fortunate here in town and through his involvement with Rotary overseas and Habitat for Humanity. He loved those experiences. We remember Rob as a practical fellow too, a real jack of all trades, who had a broad array of skills. He's fixed mowers, taps, broken ovens, and he's done a good deal of fencing on our farm and even built our shearing shed. Sometimes he'd come for dinner with a certain tool to fix something Anne had quietly asked about, having despaired that her husband would never get around to it. Years ago, our first rider mower was considered a write-off by those in the know, but Rob got it going again in his home workshop. He told us fairly recently that it was still going. Rob was careful and respectful of our busy lives, not wishing to interfere. Often we would not hear when he was in need. I didn't know he was in hospital for some weeks. In fact, not long before he fell ill, Rob was fencing in Merton and dropped by after for a beer and a chat on our veranda. This was the last time he was at our house, and he enjoyed a tour of the renovations as well as the beer. Whenever we met Rob, he would keep us updated on the achievements of his boys, their partners and the grandkids, always inquiring after ours as well. Throughout his long fight with cancer, Rob remained positive, brave and non-complaining, enduring many months of treatment in his matter-of-fact way. Stoic does not do him justice. Rob remained hopeful to the end and declared that he wanted to walk out of hospital not that long before he passed. As ever, he was thankful for what had been done for him by the doctors, his family and his friends. Vale Rob, you fought a courageous battle. You'll be much missed, especially as you and I had planned some gone fishing time. Rest in God's peace wherever you are. We bless you and we will remember you. Love, Anne and Dave Kelly. We'll now pause for a few minutes to enjoy a slideshow. Any thoughts or deeds left undone with Rob? Release them now into your thoughts. Thank you, Broderick.
I'm found was blind. Now I see 'twas grace that taught my heart to feel, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear. Yeah, I first believed.
He would have loved that music, wouldn't he, guys? He was a real muso. Rob was first a son of Miles and Trish, much loved brother of Brian, Barry, Lynette, Lucille, and brother-in-law to their parents Lynn, Sarah and Brian. Cherished father of Ashley and Guy, respected and loved father-in-law of Tammy and Emma. Adored pa of Oscar, Harry, Digby and Daisy. A loyal friend, diligent and committed member of the Apex and Rotary Clubs. Past president of the Euroa Hospital Board of Management. Past player and member of the Euroa Lawn Tennis Club. Staunch supporter of his beloved St Kilda Saints Football Club. Respected employer at Euroa Fine Foods. Rob was an integral part of the fabric of our greater community here in the Strathbogie Shire. He not only was a participant in any sport or charity, whether it involved himself or his family, he just turned up on time, took on roles on committees, or on they were with the love and support that Rob received from his second family, the Rotary Club of Euroa. In the lead up to this past Christmas, a crew of very helpful elves from Rotary packaged, transported and sold Rob's puddings and cakes and spreads at the local markets. When there was a clean-up to be done at the factory, you all showed up and helped ease their load. To Rob's friends and wider community, your love, companionship, visits and phone calls for Rob have been nothing short of amazing, and they are so grateful. Rob was surrounded by people who genuinely cared. On behalf of them, thank you. Following this morning's service, we'll leave from this chapel and make our way towards the Seven Creeks Hotel, situated at 2 Tarkham Street, Euroa, where the wake is being held. The Rotary Club will form a guard of honour as we make our way down Binney Street. As the hearse travels past the Sevens, please turn off in your car and park to join Rob's family for a chat and refreshments. It is now time for us to say our final farewell to Rob at this time and from this place. Rob gave of himself in every possible way, with his time, his skills, and his unconditional love and compassion. What he leaves us with is a wealth of memories, an example of living your best life without compromising others to achieve your hopes and dreams. This becomes a legacy for each of us, but especially for his family, who he just adored. Speak about Rob often. Recall the good and happy times shared with him. Hold close your memories and give thanks for him being in your lives. Rob, you are now free to wander the fields of your eternal rest. You are now being held in God's embrace. Rest in peace, Rob. Would you please be all upstanding? Thank you.
Well, it's all right. Riding around in the breeze. Well, it's all right. If you live the life you please. Well, it's all right. Doing the best you can. Well, it's all right. As long as you lend a hand. You can sit around and wait for the phone to ring. just glad to be here, happy to be alive. And it don't matter if you're by my side.